So today we're going to talk about rules for addition and subtraction. And we're going to focus mostly on addition, but we're going to get some subtraction in there as well. And these rules that we're going to be talking about are for all real numbers. So remember, this means real numbers. So rules for addition for all real numbers, A and B. So I'm just using A and B as a placeholder for any real number. So the first rule says if A and B are both positive, so they're both positive numbers, then A plus B is the absolute value of A plus the absolute value of B. Now remember, absolute value, no matter what you put in, you're going to get negative, positive. So when both A and B are positive, when you add them, it's like adding their absolute values. That's also like adding their distance from 0. Something to just kind of throw around in your head. But if A and B are both positive, A plus B equals the absolute value of A plus the absolute value of B. Well, what about when A and B are both negative? What does A plus B look like if they are both negative? Well, it looks like the opposite of the sum of their absolute values. So I'm going to give you an example here. If I have negative 2 plus negative 3, that's the same as negative 2 plus 3, which is negative 5. So hopefully you see that when I have two numbers that are negative, negative 2 plus negative 3, I get negative 5. So it's the opposite of their sum. Alright, well, how about this situation? If A is positive and B is negative, so A greater than 0 means A is positive, B less than 0 means B is negative. So if A is positive, B is negative, and the absolute value of A is greater than the absolute value of B. So I'm going to give you an example so that you can kind of see what we're talking about. If A is 5 and B is negative 2, the absolute value of 5 is greater than the absolute value of negative 2, because 5 is greater than 2. So if I have this situation, what does A plus B look like? Well, it looks like the absolute value of A minus the absolute value of B. So coming back to my 5 and negative 2, 5 plus negative 2 equals the absolute value of 5 minus the absolute value of 2, or negative 2, and that gives me 5 minus 2, which is 3. And 5 minus 2 is 3. Alright. What if I have this situation? Again, A is positive and B is negative, but now the absolute value of B is greater than the absolute value of A. So now let's say B is negative 6 and A is 2. So the absolute value of negative 6 is greater than the absolute value of 2. So in this instance, what does A plus B look like? Well, it's going to be opposite or negative, and it's going to be the absolute value of B minus the absolute value of A. So let's go ahead and do 2 plus negative 6. And that's going to be the opposite, or minus, the absolute value of negative 6 minus the absolute value of 2, which is 6 minus 2. And so that gives me negative 4. So let's pause for just 1 second and notice that whichever one has the larger absolute value, that's the sign that your result has. So when A was positive and the absolute value of A was bigger than the absolute value of B, our result was positive. Now that the absolute value of B is greater than the absolute value of A, our result is negative.